Her heels clicked across the dealership floor like punctuation marks, each step firm, familiar. Danielle Foster wasn't just another customer. She was the reason this building existed, brick by brick, sale by sale. But to the man standing near the front desk, Danielle was just another face he didn't recognize, and more importantly, one he didn't respect. "Ma'am," he said, eyes narrowing, "you need to leave, now, or I'll call the police." She didn't raise her voice, she didn't flinch, but behind her silence was a storm building. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't confusion. It was a moment laced with judgment, layered with something older than policy, older than the dealership itself. Danielle knew that tone. She'd heard it before, but never inside a place she owned. She glanced at the showroom she designed, the logo she trademarked, the staff who suddenly froze mid-step. And then she looked back at him. This manager with the confidence of ignorance. What he didn't know was simple. He wasn't speaking to a visitor. He was speaking to the boss. And in just a few minutes, his career would be over. Before we keep going, take a second to subscribe if you haven't already. It helps us share stories that matter. And let us know in the comments which country you're watching from. We love seeing how far these voices reach. Now back to Danielle. And the moment everything shifted. Danielle Foster didn't come from privilege. She came from principle. Born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama, she was the daughter of two public school teachers, people who believed in books over shortcuts and taught her that excellence wasn't optional, it was expected. While other kids played outside, Danielle read biographies. Names like Walker, Douglas, Parks. Her father once told her, "The world might not see you coming, but they'll feel you when you arrive." He wasn't wrong. Years later, she walked the halls of Harvard Business School. Not to prove she was smart enough, but to remind herself that she belonged in every room, no matter who doubted her. After graduation, Danielle entered corporate auto sales, where things looked shiny on the surface, but ran cold behind closed doors. She became top seller within a year. And still, the raises didn't come. The promotions went elsewhere. One executive told her with a grin, "Clients like a familiar face." She knew what that meant, so she left. No headlines, no lawsuits, just a quiet fire that wouldn't quit. Danielle used her savings, every penny she had, and opened her first used car lot on the edge of Birmingham. The building was a former auto body shop with leaky ceilings and chipped paint. But it was hers. And what she built from there? 5 locations, dozens of employees, a luxury brand that rivaled national names, and most of all, a reputation. Her staff didn't just respect her, they revered her. She paid them fairly. She promoted on merit. And she demanded dignity, both inside the building and out. Danielle became more than a CEO. She became a symbol. Clients, especially Black clients, would drive hours just to buy from her. Because they knew this wasn't just about cars. It was about value, respect, and being treated like they mattered. Still, Danielle never flaunted her title. She wore power the way some wear a watch. Quiet, understated, but undeniable. She was also a mother of 2. Her son Malik was 12. Her daughter Ava just turned 7. Danielle told them bedtime stories where the hero looked like them. She made sure they saw her work, not just the success, but the weight of it. The patience, the fight, and through it all she remained calm, thoughtful, not one to snap or gloat. But never mistake her composure for passivity. Danielle was a woman who broke glass ceilings and cleaned up the shards with grace. So when she walked into her dealership that morning, wearing jeans and a fitted blazer, not one person in that showroom should have dared question who she was. But one man did. And in that moment, Danielle didn't raise her voice. She raised a mirror. And someone's reflection was about to get very, very uncomfortable. It was just past 9 a.m. when Danielle Foster pulled into the lot of her flagship dealership in suburban Atlanta. She wasn't there for a meeting or a photo shoot. No entourage, no fanfare, just her in a navy blazer, jeans, and low-top sneakers. Casual, unassuming, but still very much the boss. She liked to show up unannounced from time to time. It wasn't about catching anyone off guard. It was about staying close to the ground, knowing how her people were treated when no one was watching. But that morning, someone was watching. Craig Walters, newly hired, transferred from a store upstate just 2 weeks earlier. Mid-40s, khakis too crisp, and a permanent scowl that said he preferred control over conversation. Danielle stepped through the glass doors with a warm nod to the receptionist at the front. A young Black woman named Tasha, who instantly straightened in her seat. But before Danielle could take 3 steps onto the showroom floor, Craig was already moving toward her. "Excuse me, can I help you?" he barked. Danielle offered a polite smile. "I'm just here to..." Craig cut her off. "We're not open to walk-ins right now unless you have a confirmed appointment." His tone wasn't professional. It was sharp, dismissive. Danielle calmly said, "I'm actually just here to..." "You're not listening," Craig snapped. "You need to wait outside or I'll have to ask you to leave." The room slowed. A couple of employees nearby froze, their eyes darting between Craig and Danielle. No one said a word, but you could feel the tension crawl across the walls. Tasha stood halfway up from her desk, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Danielle's voice didn't rise. Her posture didn't change. She simply reached into her handbag and pulled out her phone. Craig folded his arms. "Loitering is against policy," he muttered. "I've had enough today." Danielle pressed a single button and raised the phone to her ear. A moment later, someone picked up. "Luis? Hi, can you come out front, please?" "Yeah, now." She hung up. Craig scoffed. "Calling someone for backup? That won't help, ma'am." "Not backup," she replied, coolly. Clarity. Within minutes, a black SUV pulled into the lot, and out stepped Luis Rivera, the regional manager overseeing all 5 locations. He'd worked with Danielle for years, helped her expand the brand, knew the business inside and out. The moment Luis walked in, he saw Craig standing like a sentry, and Danielle standing like a storm he'd seen before. Luis didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Danielle turned slightly toward him. "It's fine, I'll handle it." She stepped forward and looked Craig in the eye, calm, direct. "You're the new floor manager?" Craig rolled his shoulders back, still unsure who she was. "That's right." Danielle nodded slowly. "Did you speak to any of the staff before confronting me?" He looked around. "No, I didn't need to." She tilted her head. "And did you ask who I was before threatening to remove me?" "Lady, I don't care who you are," he said with a scoff. "We have rules. You can't just wander in here." The room went silent. Danielle looked over at Luis, then back at Craig. A few heartbeats passed. Then she said it. "Craig, you're fired. Right now." The words didn't explode. They landed, sharp and certain. Craig blinked. "What?" Danielle extended her hand to Luis. "I need his badge and keys before he leaves the premises." Luis nodded and moved quickly. No hesitation. Craig's face flushed. You can't do this. Who even are you?" Danielle didn't flinch. She simply said, "I'm the owner, the woman you just tried to throw out of her own building." A gasp came from one of the salesmen. Tasha slowly sat back down, a slow grin curling at the corners of her mouth. Craig stood speechless, pale, frozen. But Danielle didn't linger. She turned, gave a nod to the staff, and walked to the back office. Quiet, steady, still in control. You'd think the story ended there, but in truth, that moment was just the surface of something deeper. Because what happened next didn't just shake the walls of one dealership, it sent ripples through an entire industry. By noon, the parking lot was half empty, but the internet was flooded. Turns out, one of the customers sitting in the waiting area had quietly filmed the entire exchange. Start to finish. Danielle's calm authority, Craig's belligerence. The moment he was fired in real time. The clip was uploaded in TikTok with a caption that read, "He tried to kick her out, but she owns the dealership." It took less than 4 hours to catch fire. Within minutes, it jumped platforms. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit threads dissected every second of Craig's body language. Influencers reposted it with disbelief. Verified accounts started weighing in, and by sunset, a new hashtag had taken root. CEO while black. It wasn't just about Danielle anymore. It was about what Danielle represented. The fact that a black woman could build something from the ground up, own the keys, sign the checks, and still be told to wait outside in her own empire. It struck a nerve. Because every black professional watching knew exactly what that moment felt like. The security guard who gets asked for ID at his own building, the VP who's mistaken for an intern, the doctor called nurse for the 5th time that week. This wasn't new. It was just visible. The dealership's official website was flooded with comments. Google reviews were frozen. Local news outlets picked up the story, then national media followed. CNN, MSNBC, BuzzFeed. Even Forbes ran a headline, "Luxury Auto CEO Fired Manager After He Mistook Her for a Trespasser." Danielle didn't rush to the cameras. That wasn't her style. But when the pressure mounted, she issued a statement. No anger, no theatrics, just truth. "I built this place so people like me could be treated with dignity." Even here, it wasn't enough. We talk about progress like it's permanent, but moments like this remind us it's conditional. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm looking for accountability. The clip of her reading that statement, poised, unwavering, was viewed over 11 million times in 48 hours. Meanwhile, Craig Walters tried to salvage what little reputation he had left. He gave an interview to a local paper, claiming he was just following protocol and that Danielle never identified herself. But the video told a different story. It showed a man who never asked who she was, who assumed, dismissed, escalated. He didn't want information. He wanted control. And when that control slipped from his hands, he panicked. The public didn't buy his defense. Commenters called it what it was. If she were a white man in a polo shirt, would he have stopped her? This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was muscle memory. The backlash only intensified. Calls for Craig to be blacklisted from the industry. Petitions demanding mandatory bias training at luxury dealerships nationwide. But amid the outrage, something else started to rise. Solidarity. Other black CEOs came forward with their own stories. Quiet humiliations. Power questioned. Rooms that didn't make space for them, even when they built the building themselves. A video surfaced of Danielle's first car lot 10 years ago, just a gravel lot and a trailer. Viewers shared it side by side with the footage of her dealership today. It became a symbol, not of victimhood, but of resilience. Danielle never asked to be a symbol. She never needed to go viral to prove her worth. But when the world decided to pay attention, she made sure they didn't miss the point. The internet has a short memory. Scandals rise, hashtags fade. But this wasn't just an online moment. This was a mirror, held up to every boardroom, every showroom, every corner office where someone still believes success has a skin tone. Danielle's silence could have been justified. She had nothing to prove. But silence wasn't what the moment needed. It needed truth. It needed clarity. It needed her. And Danielle gave it, with the same calm force that's built every square foot of her empire. But this wasn't the end. Because the fire that started online was about to spread to boardrooms and investors and change how her entire industry operates. Before there were hashtags and headlines, before there were 5 locations with glass facades and luxury sedans lined up like trophies, there was just Danielle Foster. And a decision. She was 22 when she got her first break, an internship at Ford. Not in PR, not in HR, in sales, the floor, the grind. She didn't just learn how to move cars, she learned how people see you when they think you don't belong. It was subtle at first. The clients who asked to speak to someone more experienced, when she'd been at the top of her training class. The senior manager, who always introduced the white interns by name, but called her, "this young lady." And the dealer who chuckled one day and said, "You're not really what folks picture when they think about luxury vehicles." She smiled politely. But she remembered. Every single word. Danielle stuck with it. She moved to Mercedes-Benz. Bigger brand, bigger showroom, but the insults got smaller and sharper. There she sold more cars than anyone else on the team, but watched a man she trained get promoted over her. 3 times. When she finally asked her manager why, he said, "You're great, Danielle, but our clients, they connect better with people they can relate to. You're not white enough for the corner office." That was the moment. No loud speech, no slammed doors, just a quiet promise made in the silence of her own apartment. "If they won't let me sit at their table, I'll build my own." It started small, just a leased lot outside Birmingham and a modest trailer. Danielle maxed out her credit cards and took out a personal loan. She pitched to 6 banks. 5 turned her down. 1 told her flat out, "Your model's too ambitious for this demographic." The banker didn't say black woman. He didn't have to. She pressed on. Danielle bought used cars from auctions, cleaned them herself, learned to do minor mechanical work to save costs, and sold each vehicle with a handwritten thank you note. Not because it was cute, because it was personal. Because her name, her face, was the brand, and people noticed. Her first year, she sold 112 cars. By year 3, she'd opened her second lot. By year 5, she was franchising. But here's what made Danielle different. She didn't build just to expand. She built to include. When she hired, she didn't look for culture fit. She looked for culture builders. Her team was made up of former teachers, single moms, first-generation college grads, and veterans. She recruited from the community and paid above standard wages. She even set up a scholarship for automotive tech students from underrepresented backgrounds. "Talent is everywhere," she once said. "Access, that's what I can give." Her vision was never just about moving metal. It was about redefining luxury. To Danielle, luxury wasn't about the badge on a hood. It was about how you're treated when you walk through the door. Dignity should come standard, she told a local journalist, whether you're buying a Porsche or just asking for directions. She didn't forget who helped her get there either. Her very first hire was a soft-spoken mechanic named Luis Soto. She met him at a local job fair. He'd been laid off from a repair chain and nearly gave up on the industry. Danielle saw something in him. She offered him $2 more an hour than what he'd asked for, and the opportunity to run a service team. Years later, Luis would become her regional manager, overseeing all 5 dealerships. To the world, Luis was her employee. But to Danielle, he was proof. Proof that loyalty, when invested wisely, always returns dividends. And that's the heart of this story. Danielle didn't just beat the odds, she rewrote them. She didn't build showrooms, she built sanctuaries. For customers who were tired of being talked down to, for employees who were tired of being boxed in, for kids who needed to see a black woman on a billboard and believe that success didn't have a uniform or a skin tone. Her offices weren't silent halls of privilege. They were alive, with culture, with purpose, with pride. And even when the numbers said she'd made it, even when Forbes named her one of the top women in auto, she never stopped walking into her showrooms unannounced. No security, no press team, just her, a coffee, and a quiet walk past every desk. She'd shake hands, ask about people's kids, check inventory sheets, because Danielle never wanted to be the kind of boss who was only seen on plaques. She wanted to be known in the break room. That's why what happened that morning hit so hard. It wasn't just disrespect, it wasn't just racism, it was a reminder of what she'd spent her whole life pushing against. Danielle didn't just sell cars, she sold dignity, wrapped in chrome and confidence. And when that dignity was denied in the house she built, she didn't just fire the man, she exposed the system, and she was just getting started. By the end of the week, Danielle's dealership was no longer just a local business, it was the front line of a cultural reckoning. Behind the scenes, the fallout was swift, and for some, long overdue. Craig Walters, the former manager, hadn't even been on the job a full 2 months. His hiring had been handled entirely by a third-party staffing firm that promised executive-level placement with zero bias. But it turned out that claim was more marketing than mandate. Danielle's HR team, now under pressure to answer how this happened in the first place, began a deep internal audit. What they uncovered was disturbing, and not just for Danielle. 3 of Craig's previous employers had terminated him for conduct violations. 2 cited failure to foster an inclusive environment. 1 cited a hostile incident involving a biracial female employee who had filed a formal complaint. None of those terminations had been disclosed by the recruiter. No background calls were made, no references were checked. The truth? Craig should have never stepped foot in that dealership. And he definitely shouldn't have been given authority over the space Danielle had fought to build. But the larger question hung in the air. How many other Craigs were out there, protected by bureaucracy, shielded by silence? Danielle didn't waste time. She didn't just accept Craig's firing as enough. She called an emergency leadership meeting and made one thing clear. If I can be disrespected in my own house, then this house isn't clean enough. Within 48 hours, a new initiative launched across all 5 dealerships. A third-party firm was hired to conduct a full-scale DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion audit. All upper and mid-level managers were required to attend a retraining seminar, one focused not on corporate optics, but on active accountability. No PowerPoint fluff, no generic slogans. Real conversations, real scenarios, real consequences. For Danielle, it wasn't about compliance, it was about culture. Racism doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in who gets listened to and who doesn't. News of the dealership's internal overhaul caught the attention of the local press. By Monday morning, a segment aired on regional television. Black CEO fired her own manager after he tried to remove her from her business. That was all it took. By lunchtime, customers were flooding the lot. A line of supporters wrapped around the building, not just to buy, but to be counted. An older black couple walked in with tears in their eyes. They weren't in the market for a new car, but they signed up for a maintenance plan anyway. "We just wanted to show our faces," the woman said. "We wanted to say thank you for not letting it slide." Teenagers came in wearing t-shirts with the now viral hashtag CEO while black. One man drove over 2 hours with his daughter just to shake Danielle's hand. "I wanted her to see what strength looks like," he told her. In real life. In the weeks that followed, the numbers didn't lie. Sales went up by nearly 22%. Online traffic spiked, applications for open roles doubled, and existing staff reported the highest morale scores since the dealership launched. But for Danielle, it wasn't about metrics. It was about reclaiming space and turning a personal insult into a public stand. She could have said nothing, let the storm pass, hired a PR firm to handle it with gloss and caution. Instead, she opened the blinds. Let everyone see it. Not the pain, the power. The incident with Craig became a case study at a local business school. Professors invited Danielle to speak about crisis management, but she reframed it immediately. This wasn't a crisis. This was clarity. And clarity is a gift if you know what to do with it. And she did, because Danielle never needed a campaign to know her worth. She didn't need headlines to find her voice. But now that the world was listening, she planned to use both. Craig thought he was protecting the dealership from someone who didn't look like they belonged. What he didn't realize was that the entire company looked like her, and now so did its future. Danielle Foster may have walked away from that confrontation with her dignity intact. She had the title, the authority, and the facts on her side. But what if she hadn't? What if her name hadn't been stitched into the ownership documents? What if she hadn't had the resources or the receipts to prove who she was? Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. This story isn't rare. It's just rarely caught on camera. Across America, Black professionals walk into rooms they've earned a place in, only to be questioned, doubted, or watched. They're followed in high-end stores, treated differently in car showrooms, spoken over in meetings, asked for ID when others aren't. And when they push back, the world accuses them of being too sensitive or making it about race. But what else is it about when the only thing that changes how you're treated is the color of your skin? Danielle's experience wasn't an isolated glitch in the system. It was the system. Studies have long confirmed what most Black people already know from lived experience. A 2022 Harvard Business Review report found that Black consumers are 40% more likely to experience disrespect or suspicion in retail environments, even when they outspend their white counterparts. In hiring, equally qualified Black applicants are called back at significantly lower rates than their white peers. And once in the door, Black employees report higher rates of micromanagement, reduced support, and slower promotions. It's not a feeling, it's a pattern, one that cuts deep, even when it wears a suit and shakes your hand. The dealership incident hit a nerve, not because it was the first of its kind, but because it was undeniable. No gray areas, no misinterpretation. A Black woman walked into her own dealership, and someone assumed she didn't belong. Because of how she looked, because she wasn't supposed to be the one in charge. Danielle didn't yell, she didn't escalate, and yet she was still told to leave. Still called a disruption, still threatened with police. If Danielle Foster can be treated this way in her own building, Vanessa says, what happens to someone without her last name on the lease? That question haunted thousands of viewers who watched the clip online. Not just because of its injustice, but because it was familiar. Some recognized their mothers in Danielle, their sisters, their daughters, themselves. And they thought, if she can be dismissed so easily, what chance do the rest of us have? Because racism isn't always about slurs or violence. Sometimes it walks in wearing khakis and a name tag. Sometimes it pretends it's about company policy. Sometimes it shows up in who gets believed and who gets escorted out. As Danielle herself later said in an interview, racism isn't always loud. Sometimes it just has a clipboard and a fake smile. And that's the danger. Not just in the act itself, but in how easily it's justified, normalized, brushed off. It's probably just a misunderstanding. Maybe she was aggressive. Let's not make it about race. But here's the thing, it was about race. That's not speculation. That's not an opinion. That's a reality Danielle had lived long before she became a CEO. A reality she fought to dismantle by building a company where everyone had a seat at the table. But even from the head of the table, racism found its way in. Not because Danielle let it, but because the system always does, unless someone locks the door behind them. And on that day, in that dealership, Danielle did. She didn't just remove a bad manager. She exposed a blueprint of bias. A mindset that said blackness and authority don't go together. A lie that far too many people still believe, consciously or not. So the question remains, if this can happen to someone like Danielle Foster, how do we protect those with no cameras, no titles, no platform? That's the real challenge. Not just holding racists accountable after the fact, but making sure they never get the chance to act in the first place. Because dignity shouldn't be something you have to prove. It should be something you're given, automatically. Equally. Always. The video kept spreading, the comments kept pouring in. People weren't just outraged, they were inspired. But Danielle Foster didn't let the moment define her. She made sure it sparked something bigger. She didn't bask in the spotlight. She redirected it onto a problem far too many tried to ignore. Instead of asking for sympathy, she started building solutions. 2 weeks after the incident, Danielle announced the launch of the Foster Initiative, a nonprofit mentorship program designed to support and elevate Black professionals in retail and automotive industries. The mission was direct: to make sure no one would be dismissed, belittled, or ignored for looking like she did. She began speaking at major business conferences, Detroit, Atlanta, Chicago, sharing her story not as a cautionary tale, but as a wake-up call. She met with auto manufacturers and dealership groups across the country, urging them to reassess how they train, promote, and treat their Black employees, not just in policy, but in everyday practice. Then came the next bold move. A $250,000 seed grant underwritten by her company, earmarked exclusively for minority entrepreneurs entering the automotive world. "No one handed me a key," Danielle said, "so now I'm building doors and giving people the tools to unlock their own." Her company, Foster Automotive Group, didn't stop at Craig's firing. They initiated mandatory listening sessions across all locations. Not seminars, listening sessions, where team members could speak freely, especially those who'd been overlooked or mistreated before. Danielle wanted her company to be better, not quieter. Not more politically correct, better. Each dealership installed a real-time accountability system where any customer or employee could report bias without fear of retaliation. Anonymous, immediate, auditable. When asked by a reporter if she thought Craig's firing was enough, she said this: "We don't just fire bad apples, we grow better trees." That quote would go viral again, this time by choice. It ended up printed on t-shirts, storefront posters, and even the staff break room walls in her dealerships. Danielle knew she had a platform, but more importantly, she knew what it was like to be without one. She didn't just want justice for herself, she wanted equity for those who'd never even get the chance to speak up. And that's where hope lived. Not in pretending racism was over, not in expecting every Craig Walters to change, but in planting roots so deep, ignorance couldn't rip them out. And Danielle did what she had always done best. She didn't just react, she rebuilt. This time, stronger, smarter, and unmistakably hers. "People think the goal is to be exceptional," she told one audience. "But my goal is different. I want to live in a world where Black excellence is no longer a surprise." And that's the legacy Danielle Foster chose to shape, not just in showrooms, but in hearts and boardrooms. Because sometimes, standing up isn't enough. You have to stand with. And thanks to her, thousands more won't have to stand alone. Danielle Foster didn't raise her voice. She raised the stakes. In a world that still treats Black success like an accident, she showed what ownership looks like. With her presence, with her power, and with her refusal to shrink. The video of Craig Walters dismissing her from her own showroom hit over 12 million views in a week. And the comments? They weren't just reactions, they were reflections. A young Black woman from Texas wrote, "I work at a car rental counter. Last week, a man told me I looked lost. I wasn't. I just wasn't white. Watching Danielle gave me my posture back." Another user shared, "I cried watching this. Not because I was surprised, but because I've lived it. But seeing her stand there, calm and composed, reminded me I don't always have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes you win by still being you." Even some of Danielle's employees, Black, white, Latino, spoke out publicly. One longtime technician posted, "She's never treated us like numbers, just people." And now she's showing the world what that looks like when it's tested. This story didn't end in fury, it ended in clarity. It showed us something essential, something we already knew but too often forget. You don't have to be loud to be undeniable. And dignity? It's not a reward, it's a right. Danielle didn't have to storm out or scream or demand. She simply reminded everyone of one unshakable truth. You don't get to decide where I belong, I already do. Soft piano music begins to rise. As this video comes to a close, let me leave you with a reminder. Whether you're working your first job, running your own business, or just walking through the world in skin they try to underestimate, you don't owe anyone proof of your worth. Danielle's story is not just about her dealership. or her title, or Craig's firing. It's about what happens when black excellence collides with ignorance and stands tall anyway. So here's what I want from you. If this story moved you, if you've ever been judged before being heard, if you believe in what Danielle stood for, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Let us know how this story hit home. And don't forget to subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ, because we tell stories that matter, that echo across borders, across lives, across time. Let your voice be part of the change, because the more we see each other, the fewer people will ever be told to leave. Never assume someone's place. You might be speaking to the owner,